there Booktube, welcome back to my channel and welcome to A Closer Book. This is a series where I talk about 3 of my recent reads. Today I'm talking about 3 books by African American authors that depict the lives of African Americans who've been living some kind of disenfranchised life because of their experience with slavery or segregation or racism in general. But while these books are all considered an important part of the African American narrative, I do want to stress that this is not the extent of the Black experience in the United States. I think sometimes when we look for books by African American authors, we think that all the books that are written by African American authors or about African American characters have something to do with race relations, and that's not necessarily true. While race relations is and has been a big part of our story for the last 400 or so years, it is not the extent of our experience here in this country and this part of the world. There are books about African American characters or books that are written by African American authors that do deal with other themes and that aren't set in a segregated South or have to do with a Black character fighting against racism in one form or another. So I just wanted to say that even though these 3 books do deal with those topics, that is not the extent of African American literature. But first, I read The Color Purple by Alice Walker. This story is about Celie and Nettie, 2 sisters who are teenagers when we meet them, while her sister is younger and is being courted by a man for marriage. The father decides that the man shouldn't have Nettie, should have Celie instead. So Celie is pawned off to be the bride, but really the homemaker and caretaker of this man's children from a previous relationship. And her experience mimics what we know of slavery, where she is beaten, she's overworked, just because she's been cast as the unfortunate child bride to this man. Before she leaves home, however, she's been raped by her father, and she has 2 children. They're taken away from her, and the book is about her trying to regain a relationship with the children that she's lost. Later, when Nettie is expelled from their childhood home and also from Celie's home where she seeks refuge, she does meet up on Celie's children and is able to bridge that gap to bring the family back together in a very long saga epic that leaves the South, goes to New York, goes to England, goes to Africa. The story is told in letter form as Nettie writes to God, and then when she stops believing in God, starts writing to her sister, and the correspondence that they keep up even when the letters are not being delivered. It is a story about life in the South, the struggles that women have. This is also a very unlikely love story, non-traditional relationship between 2 women who find themselves in love even after starting in one of the most adverse of circumstances. But it's also about the ties that bind a woman to her children, a woman to her sister, and about forgiveness, the power of forgiving people for the wrongs that they have committed against you, even before they repent of them. Alice Walker uses broken English to write this book and to transmit Celie's authentic voice as a young, poor, uneducated child bride, juvenile in her expectation of the world, but jaded by her experience of it. The first line where Celie explains to you why she's going to be writing to God, she says, "You better not never tell nobody but God. It'd kill your mommy. Dear God, I'm 14 years old. I am," and she crosses that out, "I have always been a good girl. Maybe you can give me a sign letting me know what is happening to me. Last spring after little Lucius came, I heard them fussing. He was pulling on her arm. She said, 'Too soon, Fonso. I ain't well.' Finally, he leave her alone. A week go by, he pulling on her arm again. She said, 'Nah, I ain't gonna. Can't you see I'm already half dead? And all these children.' She went to visit her sister doctor over Macon, left me to see after the others. He never had a kind word to say to me, just say, 'You gonna do what your mommy wouldn't.'" And then she proceeds on the very first page of this book to describe the abuse and the incest that she suffered at the hand of the man she thinks is her father. This is a very difficult book to read because of the graphic way in which the author describes these situations as the characters deal with the things that they're enduring and talk about them kind of as their way of dealing with what they're going through. But it is real. It is a story that grips you, and this is a book that I rated 5 stars because it's just so impactful, so profound. The way the author connected the 2 narratives that were happening, one in the South and one in Africa, showing the experience that Black people were having as a result of enslavement, the people who had been taken as slaves to the United States and the West Indies, and what their descendants experienced, but also to show these young black missionaries returning to Africa, trying to foster relationships with the blacks who had stayed in Africa, and the suspicion and the experience that they had even as they traveled the world. So this, I think, was an expertly crafted tale that showed the duality of those narratives. So this was a 5-star read for me. This one is set in Lorain, Ohio, and it starts off about two sisters, Frida and Claudia, but it's really the story of a girl who comes to stay with them for a short period of time. Her name is Pecola Breedlove, and she's been rendered homeless because of some issues that's happening between her parents. And so Claudia and Frida's parents take her in, but from the experience that she has with the two girls who already have an established relationship and she's coming in as an outsider, the way the mother talks about her when she drinks the milk, the experiences that she has as she goes through life, it shows Pecola's narrative as her parents fight. We get to see Pecola suffer abuse at the hands of the girls that she goes to stay with, the surrogate mother who's supposed to be taking care of her, her parents, an incestual relationship with her father where she becomes impregnated, and the way that other people relate to her, where Pecola herself knows that she's ugly because of the way people talk about her and describe her. And so she spends her time fantasizing about being blue-eyed because she sees a difference between her experience as a young, poor black girl and comparing that to the experience of the blue-eyed, blonde-haired girls that she knows. So this is a very sad story about the experience of a young black girl who doesn't know love because the people who should be in her life to love her are incapable of love themselves. One of the brilliant things about this book is that Toni Morrison tells the story backwards. First, she introduces you to the characters the way they are present day, Claudia and Frida and Pecola living with them. And then she goes back to tell you the story of how Pecola was living when she was living at home with her parents. Then she goes back and she tells you how the parents came to meet. Then she goes back and she shows you the life that each parent had when they were children growing up and the lovelessness that they themselves experienced that has brought them to the place where they fight in their relationship, that has brought them to the place where they abuse their daughter. Of course, there's not much to criticize about Miss Morrison's writing. She's a Nobel Prize winner after all. But there are a couple of things that I tabbed that really stuck out at me. And those really have to do with the way that she described the experience of women in this book in so many different ways. She looks at the lives and experiences of several women at different stages of their lives and compared the experiences that a girl could have, whether she was pretty or not, whether she was mixed or not, whether she was a child or an adult, whether she was married or not. And something that I admire from this author's writing style, particularly in this book, is the way she's able to move almost effortlessly from speaking about something negative, but kind of lulling you into it in the way she describes it, and alternately speaking about something good, but talking about it in a way that makes you shudder and just reek with distaste. In this book, she also goes through the 4 seasons and shows how the seasons are different for the different experiences that the characters are having, and I thought that that was really brilliantly done. So this is a book that I really enjoyed reading, even though it dealt with very difficult to read subject matter, but it's one that I'd recommend because of the profundity of Miss Morrison's writing and the way she described very normal situations, but writes about them so beautifully that you almost want to weep at the memories that she elicits by her words, as well as the visuals that she creates, so that even if you're not familiar with the situations that she's describing, you want to weep for the characters and the experiences that they're having. The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison. And finally, I read The Narrative of the Life of Frederick Douglass, an American slave, written by himself. So this is the autobiography of Frederick Douglass. This is a really short one. It's just 124 pages. And it's written in very simple language because Frederick Douglass was born a slave in Maryland, and eventually he escaped slavery. His master's wife taught him how to read and write, and even while he was still a slave, he was teaching others to read and write. So when he eventually escaped slavery, it seemed like a natural thing for him to just write all his memories and all his recollections down. And they are very intense. There are scenes where he describes as a child watching a woman being whipped whipped to the point of her back just eroding in blood. There are several descriptions in this very short book about him witnessing other people being whipped and being abused. He talked about a young girl who you could feel the knots on her bodies from the sores that just festered on her skin because she was whipped and beaten almost every day. Every time she passed by her master's wife, the master's wife would yell at her something, and if she didn't do it fast enough, and sometimes even if she did, she would be beaten. And in describing some of the horrors that he experienced and witnessed, he talks about the philosophy that some of the slave owners had, that they should beat the slaves at regular intervals, whether they had done something wrong or not, and that they should whip them for minor infractions so that they wouldn't think that they could commit major offenses. It is a harrowing read as a first-hand recollection of someone who endured the tragedy that was slavery, but also a victorious one because he escaped slavery when he was just 28 years old. There are statements in this narrative where he foreshadowed what was going to happen to him because of the philosophy that he had. He describes his attitude towards moving around, maybe the attitude that allowed him to be freed before so many others of his compatriots, but it was an attitude that he said was born from the fact that he didn't really have ties. His mother had died. The grandmother that he knew was dead. His brothers and sisters, he never really had a relationship with them because they weren't allowed to develop kinship. And his master was rumored to have been his father, and so there was no ties to keep him bound, whether physically or emotionally, to any one place. When he heard that he was going to Baltimore, he was open to this new experience. He shared a proverb where he said, being hanged in England is preferable to dying a natural death in Ireland. And so he was open to the idea of moving, and that spirit of risk-taking is probably what assured him the life that he had. Frederick Douglass's memoir is very inspiring because this is someone who overcame the most adverse of circumstances. I mean, someone who was born in slavery and witnessed and endured the kinds of things that he did, and to have achieved his own freedom, but also to have worked to ensure the freedom for others, makes him a very inspiring read. His name is one of those that we mention every year during Black History Month, and I don't think I knew enough about his story until I read this book, so I'm thankful that I did. So that's it. Thanks for watching this video. Leave me a comment down below if you've read any of these books and you want to talk about them. Like I said at the beginning of this video, books by African American authors and books that feature African American characters don't have to be books that have to do with race. It just so happened that these three did. So thanks for watching this video. Leave me a comment down below if you want to talk about these books or any other book that promote African American culture, or books by African American authors that you want to share. Go ahead and leave that in the comments. So we'll talk down there, and until next time, happy reading. Bye.